Abby, Fishers, Indiana, great to have you. I'm glad you waited, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Hi, Reg. Great to talk to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hey, regarding the Madam Secretary show, do you think that was another attempt to distinguish Hillary from Obama?
Let me first ask if you saw it.
I didn't. I'm just going off of what you said earlier.
Okay. That's important because I'm not sure. I always worry that I convey my meaning properly in this story. I don't think that's what the episode was about. This episode, if you take the homosexual element out of this episode, which you can't, but I mean for the purposes of answering your question, if you take the homosexual element out of the show, and this show is about nothing other than our government making a deal with Iran on nukes, there's no way you would support Obama and John Kerry or anybody, and there's no way you would believe them. This episode nuked the idea of doing a nuclear agreement with Iran. And I just couldn't believe that. I could not believe it, given the kind of people that write these episodes in Hollywood. I did not associate Hillary with this episode at all, to be honest with you. I don't think she had anything to do with it, because we now have to put the gay element back in. What happened is this program was actually not about the Iranian nuclear deal. It was about discrimination against gays. And the real reason in this episode that Iran is supposed to be hated and not trusted and despised, and the reason that we are not supposed to do a deal with them, is because they literally do execute homosexuals when they find them. That's true. They are a Muslim country, and if you are found to be homosexual, you'll be stoned to death if you don't recant, and undergo treatment for it. And sometimes you don't even get that opportunity. They went into great detail about what happens in stoning, what kind of death that it is. They had insubordinate people in the Secretary of State's office just telling her how full of it she was and how wrong she was and how she ought not sign on to this deal and how they ought not be part of it, how she ought to try to undermine it. They had gay activists, a friend of hers, come into her office and tell somebody that works in the office that he was worthless, even though he supports the gay agenda. He's worthless because he won't do anything to stop the Iranians from stoning this homosexual on the day they're signing the deal. I'll give you one example. The gay activist is in the office talking to one of the assistants for the Secretary of State. And the assistant is saying, look, we're working real hard. We're trying to get the Iranians to move the execution. And the gay activist loses it. The gay activist just hits the seat. What do you mean? Move it. You're no better than them. It's okay he dies. It's okay the Iranians kill him. Just not on the day you get your precious nuke deal signed. You're no better than them. He walks out. Well, that employee then is converted to an inside the office gay activist himself, and he approaches the Secretary of State, and he treats her almost with insubordination in telling her how wrong she is and how she ought to be doing more than just trying to get the Iranians to move the date of the execution. She ought to be telling the Iranians they're not going to sign the deal unless the gay guy is set free and not killed. So it's clear that, look, the homosexual, the militant political homosexual element in Hollywood ran this episode. This episode ends up being about how the Iranian nuke deal is worthless and should not be done because of how they treat gays. Now, in a way, that's a positive step. Now, the next shoe to drop would if we had an episode like this about the way women are treated in Iran and other such countries. But my point here, and I still haven't expressed this, but it dovetails with my question today. A primetime television episode about an Iranian nuke deal is dominated by a discussion of the way the Iranians treat homosexuals. And because they treat them poorly and kill them, no deal should be done. That, to me, is an example of the power of the the militant gay lobby in Hollywood to be able to write an episode and have it approved and acted, produced, and aired with that theme. The secondary aspect of it was that the nuke deal stinks. Now, you would think on CBS at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, right after 60 Minutes, a primetime episode, that if this show called Secretary of State, Madam Secretary, is going to do an episode on the nuke deal, it'd be about how great it is. It'd be an episode supporting Obama. It'd be an episode making the female Secretary of State look like she was a fundamental part of this. She's supposed to be Hillary in disguise here. But it wasn't any of that. Now, the character, Madam Secretary, ends up looking, as she does in every episode, heroic and great and flawless and should be the president and all that. That's the theme of this show. And the president's a typical boob, and the chief of staff is a mean-spirited, rotten guy. And she is the conscience of everything. But this episode just struck me because it was clear who won in the writer room on this episode about what it should be. And further, let's put the low information viewer in front of the TV set Sunday night or streaming on his iPhone, however he watches this stuff. And he watches this episode, and here is just yet another in what seems like a never-ending parade of primetime TV shows where homosexuality is featured and always in a 100% thoroughly positive light. That is another illustration of the power. What percentage of people that do this kind of thing in Hollywood, that write TV shows, produce TV shows, direct TV shows, stage manage TV, what percentage of that universe do you think is homosexual? And that number is much greater than 1%, like the general pop. That number is huge in Hollywood. And that's a partial answer to the question I've given you, but not all the way there, because I vow not to answer this until somebody, a caller, gets close. I know I'm not taking that many calls, but that's not by design. In fact, take a break and come back with some more after this, so don't go away. Brevity is the soul of wit, said William Shakespeare. So let me sum up the Madam Secretary episode. If you had to tell people what the episode was about in one line, which I should have done in the first place, this is it. Homosexuals are more important than the fate of Israel, than the fate of the Middle East, than the foreign policy of the United States. That's, if you were watching the episode on Sunday night, that's what you would conclude. I mean, if you watch this stuff totally as a sponge and you're unbiased and you don't care, you're just watching to soak it all up, and when it's over, think about what you just saw, that's what you would conclude. That homosexuals are more important than the fate of Israel, than the fate of the Middle East, more important than what the Iranians might do with a nuclear weapon. And it's just another stone on the pile that's growing. Not the best analogy. It's just another example, another bit of evidence that promotes a cause. And it's something that you wouldn't even be aware you're being affected by. In most people, I'm talking about the low information viewer, a subliminal reaction type thing. That's also part of the answer. I've been checking the email. There's a lot of people getting close. A lot of people are getting really, really close, at least to explaining it as I would. And, of course, my way is the answer. But we'll let this stew overnight.